entertaining, enabling environment. Licensing is an administrative issue to make sure that the government gets a small amount of revenue, but ostensibly that you guys can go and make films and TVs. And we will continue to champion that space and try and prevent this layer upon layer of licensing that is coming in. We see counties now doing prohibitive licensing. Again, we're trying to do a counties conference where we're going to persuade counties that actually, please, don't do it like you do the cess tax and everything else, where you bring in secondary taxation on filmmakers. We need to have a level playing field across the counties. There's some counties which charge you 200,000 shillings a day to film, and there's some counties which charge you 10,000 days to film. And what people need to realize is that they're killing the golden goose. By stopping you guys coming to film in their counties, they're losing a huge opportunity in terms of branding that county, and also the income they will get, because obviously when you turn up for a 10, 20-day shoot, you employ taxi drivers, security, mum and boggers, the hotels, the money that goes into that county far outstrips the money that you would spend on a fee. So we're trying to synergize that and work with that. Actually, under our existing legal notice of 2015, which is the latest bit of legislation on audiovisual relating to our specific industry, we were given the right for certification. It is in the legal notice. Please go and have a look at it. And it is something that, of course, we will be championing, because the global best practice is the state organ charged with building up with the industry should be the one licensing in the industry. And it should not be the person who is responsible for classification or indeed for censoring to give you the license. You cannot be at the front of the chain, at the back of the chain. You cannot be the person who is planting and then the person who is harvesting at the same time. It has to be very clear that we're two very independent arms of government. And then there's the regulators, the communications authority as well, who are there to do oversight and make sure that the law is followed. So we will be pushing for that, and we will be asking that we do follow through on our legal mandate under 2015. It is there. If you read it in black and white, the certification is there. And that was the most recent one approved by the President. And so we would encourage you to have a look at that and support us with that going forward. We really need to do a one-stop shop, and this thing of you having to go through 4 or 5 different government departments to get your licensing permits at prohibitive rates really does not benefit anybody. In the short term, it might benefit 1 or 2 government departments, but it certainly doesn't benefit the industry as a whole, and we will continue, as I said, to champion that. The issue of drones, I know that's been a frustration for you guys. We did work with the Civil Aviation Authority on that. However, we have to balance that with security issues, which are valid concerns. As you're seeing globally, there is a move for regulation of drones, and that is something we cannot stop. But what we can ensure is that the balance is the correct balance. All right? And we are starting a dialogue with those members of the security apparatus who had major concerns. The reason they put, again, a prohibitive rate on use of drones was to discourage people from having drones. And of course, that's not the global best practice. The global best practice is encourage everyone to have drones, but to work within a very tightly regulated framework. Because as you all know, drones now have reduced the cost of production hugely. You don't have to rent a helicopter. You can use a drone, which costs you $150. So we've started a conversation with them so that we can mitigate their concerns, but also make sure that as a community, we will be a country that thrives in drones. It's not just in film. Obviously, drones are being used in audio-visual, in survey work. They're being used in security. They're being used in delivery. I had meetings the other day where people are using it for blood bank delivery. I mean, we cannot stop time. We cannot sit there and stop the tide coming in. And we need to just make sure it's realistic and fair on all parties involved. So we continue to fight for you on that regard. If I could come on to the issue of Rafiki the movie, just to preempt your questions on that. I know many of you have got that, and you've probably seen recent articles in the press about that. We took a very strong view as the Kenya Film Commission that was a movie that we would support, and indeed we did support, and we will continue to support. Why are we supporting it? First of all, we have to make sure we support creativity in this country, the creative space. And secondly, above and beyond any belief we may have individually or any legislation that any state organization has, we have the Constitution of Kenya. And the Constitution of Kenya is very clear in terms of freedom of expression, in terms of freedom of media, in terms of freedom of conscience, in terms of freedom of human dignity, and many other, a plethora of things I could go through. My former days, I was a lawyer, and I would happily spend hours talking to you about it. But the Constitution is black and white about the rights to make movies and TV in a way and tell our stories, more importantly. And if we get to a situation in Kenya where we're being told what stories we can and cannot tell, then you as media need to be fundamentally concerned. Yeah? Because if it's what stories we can tell, it'll be, well, what can you write tomorrow? And you guys should be our biggest partners in this battle to make sure that we can tell our stories that are appropriately told. By all means, rate them at the end of it and give it an adult rating or an 18 rating. Absolutely, we'll endorse and support that. But don't break the Constitution and tell people what they can and can't film. And I'm afraid there will be litigation out of this. Of course, we will not get involved in it, but invariably this will lead to litigation, and it will lead to some embarrassment in government, and as a member of government, that would be most unfortunate. But we need to work out what are our mandates. We need to work out very clearly what is our law, what is our substantive legislation, and above all, what does the Constitution say about these matters. And I think I'd encourage you to read sections 27 to sections 34 of the Constitution, which are black and white about your right under our Bill of Rights to tell the stories that you want. All right? So I think there's no grey area there. I hope I haven't left any area there for you to think about where our position is. It's black and white, and we will continue to march to that tune. And of course, I can comfortably say that we do have the support of senior members of government in this regard. So I cannot speak for other government departments, but in this one, I know it's very close to the heart for those people who drafted the Constitution and to the state that those rights are supported and upheld within the right context. I think really that's probably covered most of what we needed to say today. Timothy, is there anything I've left out?
We've covered
everything? Everything. Fine. I think, time to have questions. It has made my work and KFC's work very hard. We've just come back from Cannes, and as you can imagine, there I am trying to woo international filmmakers to come and spend millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in Kenya. And the first question they ask me is the licensing situation in Kenya. And of course, that cannot be good for business. And we are trying as a government, not just in this sector, but in numerous sectors, to make it ease of business a very easy point. So I could comfortably say, on an international perspective, it has made things harder. And I think if you speak to any of our local producers, and if you just have to look on what's been going on in social media, the frustrations are very clear. The industry as a whole is frustrated with the barriers that are being put up and the costs that have been put up. In an industry which has got very tight margins in any event, it's a very difficult working environment. So that is why, as Kenya Film Commission, we will endeavour to work with other state departments to remove those barriers. In terms of the second question, the licensing issue, this is an issue which I think the stakeholders should take up and follow through to its natural conclusion. Within government, we are having a very robust discussion about it, which involves the other stakeholders, involves the Attorney General's office, interpretation of what is the law, and so forth. And one hopes that within the next few months, we will have a very clear answer to remove this confusion. Thank you very much for that, Brenda. I would be very cautious of any stake officer who says they speak on behalf of the President. I would perhaps ask the President, number one. I certainly wouldn't deem to speak on behalf of the President. Number two, in terms of a relationship, I'm a presidential appointee, and one has to query the stance of a stake officer who attacks a presidential appointee. I think that's disrespectful to the presidency. Number three, I think in terms of Rafiki, was a classic example of where we should have talked together first. We should have reached a common position first before acting unilaterally. And that would have saved a lot of this. We will never compromise the interests of our industry and our stakeholders, period. And we will not be browbeaten to do that either. In terms of our working relationship, yes, there are tensions. There's always tensions in families. I think it's something that we can work through with dialogue. I think deep down we should all have the heart of the industry as our common aim, and I believe we can achieve that. In terms of the KFC board, I don't know enough about them in terms of, I think they currently don't have a quorum. I think they're meant to have 8 members plus government members. I think they're down to 3 or 4. So we have tried to reach out to the board, but as to the efficacy of the board at the moment, I'm not sure. So we do have some tensions there, but nothing that can't be resolved with some reasonable dialogue and just respect of our respective mandates. I think that's the law is very clear, as I pointed out, as to what our mandates are. And I think if we all respect our mandates, there shouldn't be a problem here, and the industry will be better for it. Brendan, does that answer your question? Thank you.
Any other question?
Could somebody show me the law in Kenya that allows the banning of a film? There isn't one. There is a law that allows you to certify, to rate, to issue a license or not to issue a license. There is no law that allows you to ban a movie after it has been issued a license and filmed in line with the laws of the country. And if your premise for banning a movie is the subject matter, then you're on very sticky ground. And the justification from what I've seen with Rafiki was that it contained homosexuality. And that homosexuality was at odds with our national culture. Let me ask you a question. Who here has seen a Kenyan production that has had a theft in it? Who here has seen a Kenyan production that has a murder in it, that has had terrorism in it, that has corruption in it? What a ridiculous premise to have. Are we just going to see sanitized movies where we're all doing the right thing and living as angels? Of course not. So as a premise, it's intellectually completely invalid, and in law it's completely invalid as well. And so how that will stand up, put under the scrutiny of the courts, I do not know. But I will leave that for those people to deal with that. But it's a ridiculous notion that you ban a movie because it contains an illegal subject matter. It'd be entirely different if the movie was pornographic. It'd be entirely different if it was a fly-on-the-wall documentary about 2 lesbians. This was a movie which involved acting. The nature of acting is that you're playing out roles. I think you're just looking at you all nodding, you're all kind of on the same page about the ridiculous nature of that. Thank you.